Welcome, everybody. Well, we'll get started as we've got 54 people in attendance. I think it's a good time to get started. My name is Carrie Bower. Welcome to this Hourglass webinar, where we will talk about debt and coerced debt, the impacts and solutions for older people. Before we get started and I introduce Hourglass, who we are and what we do, I'm going to hand over to our panellists to just give their own introductions. So first of all, Genevieve, could we start with you?
Hi, I'm Genevieve. I'm a senior public policy advocate at Step Change Debt Charity. We're the largest free provider of debt advice in the UK.
Thanks, Genevieve. And Matthew, can I come to you?
Of course. So I'm Matthew. I'm the collaboration partner at Money Wellness. So we're a free provider of debt and money advice, and we're here to talk a little bit about the solutions and impacts that it has.
Thanks, Matt. And Colin.
Hi there, I'm Colin. I am the Frontline Services lead for Hourglass for our work in Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, and supporting the wider work across the charity.
Thanks, Colin. And today we're going to hear from Genevieve, who's going to speak about step change, coerced debt, what coerced debt looks like, some of the impacts and the themes and findings from their report that was recently published this year, Too Close to Home. We'll then hear from Matt, who's going to talk to us about debt in later life and the support available from Money Wellness. And then Colin is from Frontline Services, as he's already explained, and he's going to talk us about an anonymous example of where Hourglass has supported somebody through coerced debt. At the end of those presentations, there will be a Q&A panel, so please do submit your questions in the Q&A section. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, to interact with each other. I will not be looking at the chat during this session just because I find it really distracting. So I will be looking at the Q&A so that we could submit those questions to the panel at the end. So if you can, please refrain from putting questions into the chat function. So first of all, for those of you in attendance that aren't familiar with Hourglass, the work that we do, I just want to introduce who we are and what we do. Hourglass is the only UK-wide charity dedicated to ending the abuse, harm, and exploitation of older people. We do this through campaigning, policy influencing, working and collaborating with other organisations. We deliver training, raise awareness across all sectors, and we also have a frontline service, which you will hear far more about from Colin, where we work directly with older people across all 4 nations, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Economic abuse is one of the most common types of abuse that we hear from older people at Hourglass. It often coexists with other forms of abuse. Millions of pounds worth of money and assets are stolen, defrauded and coerced from older people. And sadly, many of those older people are targeted by those that they trust. Often this is their family members, adult sons, adult daughters, grandchildren, other family members. Today we're going to hear about some of those stories and it will be quite emotive, but we'll also hear about some of the solutions to those issues. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Genevieve. Genevieve.
Thanks, Carrie. I'll just share my screen a second so I can get this presentation up for you. Is that visible? Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for having me today. It's really good to come and speak to you all. As I said, I'm Genevieve and I work in the policy team at Step Change Debt Charity. We provide free debt advice and solutions. And since we were founded in 1993, we have helped over 7.5 million people. And my job in our external affairs team is to try to understand why our clients are experiencing debt, problem debt, and to translate those insights into recommendations for how we can achieve our public policy aim of campaigning for a society free from problem debt. So today I'm going to talk about some research that I've worked on over the past year, and the result of this research is a report called Too Close to Home, which talks about the experiences of our clients who've experienced coerced debt and economic abuse. The research finds that coerced debt creates and compounds harm, increasing the burden of dealing with debt, causing diminished financial resilience, and leading to low confidence in an ability to manage money and plan a financial future. Coerced debt can also deepen debt problems and keeps the victim survivor, that is the person who's experienced that abuse, tethered to their abuser. And a couple of things I just want to preface first off. So this research is quite general. So it's focused on all different people who've experienced coerced debt of all different ages within romantic and familial relationships. So I'm going to be focusing on those themes. We spoke to 6 clients. None of them had experienced abuse from from child to parent. But that is just, and we don't actually have data that we were able to disaggregate according to age, but the research is still really relevant for understanding the kinds of themes, impacts and solutions. So I just wanted to caveat that first. And I also wanted to preface that I do touch on some difficult subject matter, including mentions of suicide, domestic abuse and attempted murder. So just take care of yourself when you're listening today. And in terms of how I'm going to structure this, I'll begin by laying out some definitions so that we're all on the same page about understanding coerced debt and economic abuse and where it sits within domestic abuse, how far we've come in terms of understanding it and putting solutions in place, what it looks like for our clients. So we've got 3 client stories. And finally, I'll share the report's key recommendations. So I'll start by laying out some definitions. Coerced debt occurs in the context of an abusive relationship. That can be a current or former romantic relationship or a relationship with a family member. And it involves an abuser forcing the victim survivor to make transactions that lead to debt. And the victim survivor feels they can't say no because they fear the consequences. It's distinct from something like a romance scam because in that case, the perpetrator poses as a potential romantic interest for the purposes of exploiting that person. But this is reliant on a personal connection and an established kind of pattern of behavior towards that person. Coerced debt is not a standalone crime in itself, but the 2015 Serious Crime Act created the coercive and controlling behaviour offence, and coerced debt is an example listed in the statutory guidance. Reporting for this offence is low, and prosecutions are also low, and I'll touch on a bit more about that later. Coerced debt is a form of economic abuse, which in itself is a common form of domestic abuse. And it's a tool that abusers can use to exert more power and more control. Economic abuse was enshrined in the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021, and it's defined as any behaviour that has a substantial adverse effect on a victim's ability to acquire, use or maintain money or other property and to obtain goods or services. This slide gives a list of indicators of coerced debt, and these are the same indicators used by the charity Surviving Economic Abuse, who are the leading charity in this space. I won't run through them all, but particularly common ones were being made to buy something on credit, having a joint account misused, having bills put in your name, including household and utility bills and car finance contracts. At this stage, it's also important to note a bit of a lack of consensus across different sectors over what can be grouped in coerced debt, because fraudulent transactions, i.e. where the abuser would for example, take the victim survivor's phone and apply for an overdraft facility without the victim survivor knowing, that would be a fraudulent transaction. And there are specific legal routes for that. But for the purposes of understanding and having a kind of holistic approach, we've grouped that under the same coerced debt umbrella. And that's the same approach that surviving economic abuse takes. It's also what leading academics in the space do. And it's to help us to understand that context, because for every client that we spoke to who had these fraudulent transactions made, they also were experiencing that abuse. And so for us to understand that full picture, we've chosen to use that understanding. But there is a bit of a debate about that. So I just wanted to clarify that. Where have we got to? So as I mentioned, there have been important legislative changes across the past 10 years. We had the Coercive and Controlling Behaviour Offence and the Serious Crime Act in 2015, and economic abuse was enshrined in the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021. And this was really significant because it meant that in the law, it was acknowledged how a pattern of behaviour by an abuser could create intimidation, could create fear, and how the exploitation, sabotage, and restriction of economic resources was actually a fundamental aspect of domestic abuse. So that has been really important in terms of acknowledgement, understanding, and to some extent legal remedies. There's also been some brilliant work by different firms and across different sectors. So we had UK Finance, the trade body for financial services, published their financial abuse code in 2021. The government debt management function published their economic abuse toolkit. And in both cases, this was to help understanding and identification of coerced debt and economic abuse and kind of raise that awareness. We also, of course, had Consumer Duty in 2023, and that is significant in the sense that it raised the bar on what firms need to do to support vulnerable customers, of which victim survivors of economic abuse are one. And I thought it would also be useful to talk about what a victim survivor at the moment could do about coerced debt. So they have a few options. They can pursue legal action under the Serious Crime Act. That is quite rare. Prosecutions are low, and for many reasons, it may be inappropriate for a victim survivor to pursue legal action against their abuser for reasons of safety, reasons of low awareness, the overwhelm of pursuing a criminal trial, all sorts of reasons. They can also get debt advice. They can seek a solution. That I'll talk a bit more about the impact of that, but that can be one option. Or they can speak to their bank or lender, and there's a possibility that that bank or lender could write off the debts, but that's not especially common, and I'll speak about that in a moment as well. So moving on to the actual research, this is the report here, and there's a QR code here. If you'd like to take a look at it in more detail, these slides will be shared, so you'll be able to also get the link through that. But the reason we wanted to do this research was that we'd identified for a few years that a significant minority of our clients were experiencing economic abuse. And so we really wanted to understand their experiences and how they were getting support. And so what we did was we ran a client survey, and then we did in-depth interviews with six of those clients. We also held a focus group with our debt advisors to understand from their perspective what it was like to advise those clients and their perceptions of how they were getting support and whether they were getting the support that they need. And then finally, we ran national polling to try and get a picture of the national prevalence of coerced debt, but also to understand some attitudes to coerced debt and the levels of awareness of coerced debt. So that was very interesting. And I'll come into the findings of that report in a moment. So our national polling estimated that 1.6 million UK adults have experienced coerced debt at the hands of a current or ex-partner or family member in 2024. This is 3% of the population. And for our clients, that figure is understandably higher, with almost 1 in 8 people, 1 in 8 of our clients impacted by coerced debt. And the way that we identified that was with that list of indicators that I showed you on a previous slide. So we're not asking people, have you experienced coerced debt? We're asking, in the past 12 months, has a family member, current or former partner, made you do any of the following? So we're trying to get that real picture of the coerced debt, and not just people's kind of self-reporting. So it's a significant minority of people who are affected, many of whom do not have access to the right support. So we found in that national polling as well that over 2/3 of people with coerced debts experience negative financial impacts, such as going without essentials to keep up with debt repayments, and over half did not seek help with their debts. And it's for similar reasons to, why perhaps people wouldn't want to pursue legal action. There's low awareness of coerced debt and help available. There's a fear of being tied to your abuser, and there's issues with capacity when you're so overwhelmed that you have to access a whole host of different services. The debts are low on a victim survivor's priority list. We heard that 13% of those with coerced debts had them written off. And this was actually higher than we thought it would be. And it speaks to some of the brilliant work that individual firms are doing to try to address this. But our qualitative data on the whole revealed inconsistent and mixed experience of support. And we heard about a lack of compassion, inconsistent practice, and insufficient support. And this was across a whole host of different sectors. That includes debt advice, it includes financial services, local authorities, domestic abuse organisations. So it's not about calling out individual sectors, but it's about showing that we need to raise the bar on how we support victim survivors for all of us who are potentially interacting with these people. A particular frustration for the clients that I spoke to was the impact of coerced debts on their credit record. They felt that the fact their credit scores had plummeted all because of the actions of their abuser was deeply unfair. And the practical impacts of this could be so extreme as to create significant financial exclusion. For example, clients told me about being unable to take out mobile phone internet contracts, buy a car and hire purchase, or even get a mortgage. And one had even been denied a job because of the impact on their credit score. So this is really unfair because these victim survivors are being punished twice. They're going through this abuse, and then their financial situation is impacted long after the abuse has finished. Finally, we wanted to get a sense of those attitudes and understanding of coerced debt and economic abuse, and over 2/3 of UK adults did not know what coerced debt and economic abuse were. And that was unsurprising, because we had a sense that awareness would be low, and that contributes to people's ability to recognise it in themselves, in a friend or family member, and even again across different sectors working with these individuals. So it really speaks to the importance of raising awareness of this as an aspect of domestic abuse. We also put a hypothetical scenario of coerced debt to our respondents. And in that scenario, over 2/3, nearly 80% actually of UK adults didn't believe that the victim survivor should be responsible in that hypothetical scenario. I'm now going to move on to talk about some client stories that illustrate what it's like to go through coerced debt and how they sought support. First, we have Anita. That's not her real name. She is a woman in her 50s and she has a grown-up daughter. Her abuser was extremely violent and was imprisoned for attempted murder. She felt really unsupported with the psychological impacts and the trauma, and she had to leave her beloved vocation of teaching because of the impact on her mental health. She did, however, feel quite supported by her bank. She felt that she said that they put her through to a specific vulnerability team that kind of resolved her issue. They gave her forbearance on her mortgage, and they wrote off half of her debts, so £25,000 worth of debts that were accrued by her abuser they wrote off, and she said that that helped her stay in her home, which is just so important when everything around her had really fallen apart. Now I'll move on to Liz. Liz is actually her real name. She's actually one of our trustees, and she has bravely come forward to share her story publicly, which we really appreciate. She spent much of the relationship with her abuser trying to correct all of the financial decisions her abuser was making so that she could try to keep the roof over their head and put food on the table for her and her children. But she just could not stem the enormous tide of problem debt all by herself. She relied on public transport to ferry her children to school with lots of different buses, while her abuser splurged on taxis, alcohol, and drugs. And she then found it incredibly difficult to extricate herself from the joint mortgage once she eventually fled the abuse. Her abuser refused to release her from that mortgage. And she also found it really difficult to separate herself from the joint debts. And at the time when she received advice from us, this was the late 2000s and early 2010s, so a very, very different landscape in terms of understanding. And what she decided to do was just to absorb all of the debts in her own name, just so that she could get away from her abuser. She particularly suffered with her credit record. She found herself locked out of a mortgage. She was locked out of car finance and almost lost out on a job because of it. She told me that the relationship with her abuser lasted 11 and a half years, but the after effects, the financial effects, lasted an additional 11 and a half years. And that's why she called it a life sentence. She said that a lot of custodial sentences don't last as long as the impact that she was experiencing. And finally, I'll move on to Cheryl, which is not her real name. She was in a very violent relationship as well with her abuser, and she fled this relationship after he put her in hospital. But despite the violence and the abuse and the involvement of the police and various support organisations, she didn't realise she'd experienced coerced debt. She actually told me she knew of coerced debt, but she didn't feel that it represented her situation because she really blamed herself. She said that, well, I said yes to it. But as it says in this quote, she said yes for an easy life. And an easy life meant avoiding violent consequences. And that sense of blame was really common among all of the clients that I spoke to. And it's deeply upsetting because, as is clear from these 3 stories, these women were going through an incredible lot. And they were ultimately coerced into those debts. So what's working for victim survivors at the moment and what isn't? Debt advice can achieve some really positive benefits for victim survivors. It can assuage anxieties around interest payments. We can offer breathing space. Some victim survivors will have access to insolvency solutions, which ultimately deal with their debts. But this may not be an appropriate solution for all victim survivors. And crucially, it means that they're having to repay debts that they just did not accrue themselves. We also know that best practice guidance has been developed, which has led to more positive outcomes. But still, the majority of victim survivors are not getting economic justice. And by economic justice, I mean an outcome where the victim survivor doesn't have to repay the debts that they were coerced into, and a credit score that is restored to reflect their actual creditworthiness and not the abuse they have suffered. There have been some brilliant initiatives from firms, and there's also an initiative I'd like to quickly mention called the Economic Abuse Evidence Form. This is an information sharing tool devised by Surviving Economic Abuse and piloted in partnership with Money Advice Plus, which is a Frontline debt advice provider. And it's used by a specifically trained debt advisor to gather all of the evidence that a bank or lender would need to make a decision about a victim survivor's case. And it means that the victim survivor only has to tell their story once, avoiding the trauma of having to repeat their story. And it also presents the information in a clear and standardized format. to minimise the secondary trauma for staff who need to process that evidence, and also enables the bank or lender to make a quicker decision. And it's led to some really positive outcomes. And sometimes it's led to write-off, which has been hugely beneficial. But it is a pilot, and it's still in that pilot phase, and it's only accepted by 25 banks. So finally, our recommendations. First, we're calling on the Treasury and the Home Office to convene a cross-departmental economic abuse task force. Central government needs to take a leading role in understanding the barriers to achieving economic justice for victim survivors, to lay out a clear vision for change, the change needed to transform victim survivors' lives. Second, we commend the work the FCA has done thus far to better understand and offer solutions to economic abuse, but we would like to see a more consistent industry-wide approach to economic abuse and coerced debt to just bring up all firms and lenders to that same high standards. Third, we would like to see support from MAPS, the FCA, and wider stakeholders for the continued rollout of the economic abuse evidence form and its extension to non-financial services creditors. And related to that, we are also calling for victim survivors we are also calling for specialist debt advice for victim survivors to be developed and commissioned by the government and MAPS. And finally, I've shown the long-term financial impacts of an impaired credit record on a victim survivor through no fault of their own. So we would like to see the coordination of a credit restoration and repair framework for victim survivors. I've thrown a lot of information at you in this presentation, so I'm just going to briefly recap the main messages that I'd like you to take away from this presentation. The coerced debt is a form of economic abuse that involves the abuser forcing a victim survivor to make transactions that lead to debt, and the victim survivor doesn't feel that they can say no for fear of the consequences. Coerced debt includes actions like being made to take out a credit card or loan, having bills, phone contracts, or car finance agreements put in your name, and having individual or joint credit cards used, all without the victim survivor's permission. As we understand it, it also includes fraudulent transactions that occur in a domestic abuse situation. We've seen great progress made from a legal and regulatory perspective, leading to excellent initiatives and specific approaches to coerced debt that lead to positive outcomes, but there is more work to do. And crucially, the majority of victim survivors are not getting economic justice. That means that they're often paying back debts they didn't accrue themselves, and if they do get debt write-off, their credit scores remain impaired, which has significant knock-on effects for their financial future. Economic justice would put the victim survivor back in a financial situation that they were in before the abuse started. So we need to see work led by government to identify and unpick the barriers to achieving economic justice for victim survivors, and we need a joined-up approach across financial services and debt advice to ensure that victim survivors get consistent, good quality support.
Thank you, Genevieve. That was fascinating. And the dynamics of coerced debt in later life may be very different, may be more complex, and very much your presentation focused on those intimate relationships and how coerced debt can really increase that entrapment for a victim survivor. And we're going to hear now from Matt about debt in later life, and then we'll bring both of those kind of topics together with Colin and his example. So thank you. For anybody that's interested, we will be sharing all of the slides after the session in an email. So you will have those to refer back to. Thanks ever so much, Genevieve. If anybody has any questions for Genevieve, please put them in the Q&A now. And I will hand over to Matt.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I'm just going to share my screen now, so I won't be a moment. Just checking, can everyone see that? That is perfect. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much to Genevieve as well for her contributions. I think we can all agree today that some of those figures and key findings were were absolutely eye-opening, and some really kind of harrowing stuff there as well. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that's listening today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to hear what we've got to say in our contributions as well. So I'm Matthew. I'm the collaboration partner here at Money Wellness. So we're really here to talk about the solutions that are available for people across the UK when they find themselves in a position of debt. That can be people that have been victims of coerced debt, but it can also be anyone of any age group across the UK. So a range of organisations will do research on a number of people that need debt support. But one thing that's generally in common is that number will be in excess of 10 million people. So that's 10 million people across the UK that's in need of debt support. I think we can all agree that that number is frankly too high. So I wanted to share some figures with you in regards to what we're seeing on the ground in regards to the increase in costs. So these numbers have come from real life customers that have come to us for debt advice and shared the circumstances and the costs. Now, take something as simple as the rent expenditure. There's been a 14% increase in the last 12 months alone and how much that's costing people. And it really follows a similar trend when you look at the utilities and the water costs as well. But it's not just priority bills that are going up. An absolutely staggering figure that you can see is that the average grocery bill went up by 24% from the customers that we've spoken to. That's, in this situation, £48 a month that have come out of people's pockets in the last year alone to make sure that they're feeding the family. And you can absolutely see why more people will be feeling the financial pressures and they will need that specialist support that the debt advice sector provides. And like I say, that's where the debt advice sector and organisations like myself, like Money Wellness, come in. So a little bit about us. Money Wellness is a money advisory platform focused on social good. We're on a mission to improve individuals' financial well-being, and to us it truly is personal. We're all about relationships and not transactions. Our aim is to show people a way forward and help them to live more and stress less. And we achieve this through what we do and all the services that we provide. Now, we currently support over 1,000 financially vulnerable customers a day. And of those 1,000, 2 in 3 do entrust us and disclose a vulnerability about themselves. That can be something from a physical disability, a mental health condition, or something that's temporary. Someone that's broke their leg and temporarily they will need vulnerability in addition, they will have a vulnerability and need additional support. I think because of that, it's really, really important that our advisors provide a non-judgmental, supportive service, because everyone's got their own stories, everyone's got their own worries and concerns, and it's really important that the team, are aware of that and they provide that non-judgmental service. Now, prior to my current role, I was a debt advisor for Money Wellness, and I'm really proud of the team and the work that they do to make people feel comfortable when they're seeking that support about something that is really, really personal. Now, another key focus of Money Wellness is to make debt advice as accessible as possible, night and day. So there is 2 main ways that people will tend to reach us. The first is through the phone, through a phone call. We're available 7 days a week, and that will usually be between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. But you can actually also access debt advice online as well. That service is 24/7. So essentially, someone can come to us for advice at any time of the day, at any point of the year. Now, throughout the debt advice journey, our advisors will obviously signpost to specialist support as well. That goes beyond debt. And because of this, we do collaborate with a network of support organisations. This includes, identifying and essentially helping customers with some of the following things. Now, a key area that will be covered in our phone calls is maximising people's income. It's all good and well with us helping someone with a solution here and now, but we need to build that financial resiliency. So moving forward in later years, they've got all the tools that they need to be able to stay out of debt where possible. So what we will do is we will do a benefit check with all of our customers to make sure that they are receiving everything that they're entitled to. Where they're not, we will make sure that they've got that support, they know what else is available, and we will help them on the way to getting that extra income as well. But it's not just about the income, it's also about grants. There are thousands of grants out there that people are entitled to, but frankly, they just don't know about it. That can be things like water and energy grants, writing off debt for people that are struggling to afford such a priority bill. It can include grants for veterans or those of certain faith-based groups as well. So it's really important that with our responsibility of providing advice, that we make sure anyone that might be eligible is aware of that support that could be available to them. And I guess it's not just about the money that we can put in people's pockets. It's also about the practical support as well. We'll often, look at food vouchers that people may be entitled to and refer them on to places like food pantries. There's so many great services out there where you can pay as little as £5 a week and get 30, £35 worth of food shopping in. And it's little helpful tips like that that our advisors provide that will just help bring the cost down and allow people to live more and stress less. As well as that, we do look at vulnerability support. All of our customers will receive a vulnerability assessment to ensure we're meeting everyone's needs. Now, although our journey is built with vulnerable customers in mind, we do want to collaborate with specialist organisations to make sure customers are fully supported outside of debt advice. That can be referrals for people struggling with mental health, bereavement, and many other situations as well. Now, once we've supported with all of this holistic and vital support, we will identify where a customer may benefit from a debt solution. So what we'll do is we'll run through an income and expenditure with that individual. We'll get a real understanding of what they've got coming in, what they've got coming out. Now, it's so important that budget is not just accurate, but it's also sustainable as well. I think we'll all know that anyone that's struggling financially, they will tend to be spending a lot less than they need to. You know, they'll be really cutting back on their food shopping. They'll be not getting all the clothes that they need to, you know, really support their family. And ultimately, that's not always sustainable. So yes, they might be spending very little at the moment, but we want to make sure that whatever solution we put in place for them is not just suitable for them this year, but it's suitable 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future to make sure that they've got something that they can complete. But as I said earlier on, we will often, at the end of our advice call, recommend a debt solution for someone. Where the individual can afford a repayment towards the debts, we will look at repayment solutions like free debt management plans. That essentially allows the customer or service user to make one affordable payment to their lenders instead of paying everyone individually at rates that they often can't afford. Unfortunately, not everyone we speak to is in a position to make regular payments towards the debts, as I'm sure you can appreciate. At that point, we can look at debt write-off solutions like debt relief orders or bankruptcy and the Scottish equivalents where they reside in Scotland. So there really is a host of solutions available for people with, you know, with different situations and different walks of life. Now, I wanted to spend some time, of course, talking about what we are seeing from our over 60s that we speak to and support. You know, the same people many of us here today are supporting or caring for day in and day out. So I just wanted to share some of the insights that we've got there. Now, our customers over 60 are coming to us with many similar issues to the rest of our customers, but there are some real key differences that you'll see on the slide there. So for starters, the average customer over 60 is coming to us with, on average, £5,000 more debt than the average customer that we support. But not only are they coming to us with more debt, they're coming to us with less income to hopefully try and resolve those issues. So you can only imagine the stress and uncertainty that that person's facing, thinking that they've simply not got enough money to come to a solution. Not only that, but you can see that anyone over 60 that we speak to does disclose a far higher rate of vulnerabilities to us as well, which really does mean that they need that specialist support. So there's a few sort of important figures that we've come up with as well and that we've seen from the people that we're supporting. And I think one of the most interesting ones is that 2 in 5 of the over 60s that we spoke to have arrears with their energy provider. So 2 in 5 people that come for support over the age of 60 are struggling to keep the heating on. We all know how imperative that is for anyone really, but especially people of that age group. So it's so important that we do more to make sure that we're supporting them. Now, one of those things that's important is making sure, as I mentioned earlier on, that they are getting all of the financial support that they're entitled to. Where we have noticed that a customer is entitled to additional benefits, the average uplift is £317 a month that we've been able to identify. So we're not talking £5 here, we're talking a real tangible amount of money that can make a big difference to someone's life. It can be the difference between them struggling to make their repayments to their lenders and keeping the gas and electric on, to being far more comfortable and really seeing a path to the future. And finally, with data provided by Policy and Practice, we've actually found that there's 850,000 eligible pensioners currently missing out on pension credit. So again, it really reinforces that message that there's more that can be done to make sure that these people are getting everything that they're entitled to. And I think personally, as these customers fast approach the retirement age, the need to deal with these debts will become larger. You know, we really want people to retire with the dignity that they deserve. And I think it's so important that we try and get that early intervention to make sure that the debts are dealt with before their income starts to drop to things like their state pension or private pension. And finally, I just wanted to share a little bit of our sort of customer testimonies. So first, we've got Joan. We spoke to Joan a couple of months back. Now, She sadly lost her husband around 4 months ago, and as a result of his death, she lost half of the income, half of the pension. I can only imagine what Joan was going through, as well as dealing with these debts that we all know can cause stress, anxiety. She's also dealing with the sadness of losing her husband. She was actually recommended to speak to Money Wellness, thankfully. She was nervous, she was embarrassed. Many of our customers tend to bury their head in the sand, so having that first interaction can be a really, really big step. But as Joan said, as Joan said on the testimony there, that getting in touch with us was one of the best things that she's done. And if you have a little bit of a read of her testimony, you can see that she's now in a much better place, and that weight really has been lifted off her shoulder. But as well as Joan, we've also got Michael. So Michael discovered that he was eligible for unclaimed financial benefits after reaching out to Money Wellness, and that significantly improved his financial situation. So I did just want to share a short video of Michael, provided that it works, so you can hear a little bit about his story. So we'll give that a go now.
My finances, I thought, were okay, but with the cost of living going up, I didn't have as much disposable income. And that really did shock me. I think I wasn't expecting it. I felt, a bit vulnerable financially. I was in big debt to credit card, making me feel I need to do something about my finances. But I went online and I contacted, it was Money Wellness that came up, and I think I talked to somebody on the phone, and he suggested a debt package, paying back over a period of time. But the thing is, that same person at Money Wellness suggested, based on your finances, you're eligible for housing benefits. So that was a game changer. But I was feeling quite apprehensive, because I thought, what if they say, no, you're not eligible? There's nothing I saw said that I was eligible for housing benefits. But the lady went through all my finances, went and checked on their computer, came back, said, we think you're eligible to £47 a week. You need to claim it. And you may be eligible for backdated. So that was fantastic. So because the next step then was to go and claim it. I felt quite anxious about things. I felt I wasn't in control of what I was doing, even though I'd had very good support. I lacked confidence, even though I sort of knew in my heart that I could do this. I have done this. My job was doing things like that in the past. I was a careers officer, I was a teacher, I was helping people claim, asylum seekers, all these things. But for me, I suddenly found that quite a problem, because I was all worried about whether I'm going to do it properly. I just went through a stage where I was feeling quite anxious about things. And so I think it affected me. So it was a big relief that, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Well, the library, my local library, sent all the material off to housing benefit. I contacted them a few weeks later. I was on the phone a while, but I got through, and they said, everything's in order. So, you will be able to claim. So that was a great relief. So I wrote a very nice letter asking, and it could be backdated for about 3 months, and the backdated went through. So I was £800, I think, about. So everything seemed to change with that.
Thank you very much. So, one of the main issues is there's many more people like Michael. There's many more Michaels and Jones that aren't getting the support that they need because they don't know that it's out there. And I think that's my mission as the collaboration partner here at Money Wellness, to make sure that we are, reaching as many people from different walks of life. So I appreciate you taking the time today to listen to what I've got to say, and I'll be obviously more than happy to answer any questions a little bit later on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. That was really, really helpful to know the range of services that you provide. And I know we know in the news at the moment around winter fuel payment that there is a really low take-up of kind of benefit claims amongst the older generation, but also a huge amount of shame and stigma that comes back from history and generational impacts that means that often older people don't recognise that there is support available, as well as, you know, that coercion might be happening when we're hearing about coerced debt from Genevieve. So it's really, really good to know that there's all these different services that are available, and there's some questions already in the Q&A section, so we'll come to those later. Before we do, we're going to bring those two topics together and hear from Colin. Colin is going to talk about an example of where Hourglass has supported somebody. So Colin, I will hand over to you now. Thanks.
Thanks, Carrie. So, yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about someone who used our services at Hourglass. I've called this person Maria and not her real name. Maria was in her late 70s, and her son, David, has a substance misuse issue, and that had been going on for many years. And so about 2 or 3 years ago, he told Maria that drug dealers were going to kill him unless he paid them £100,000. That's 100,000. Maria then, in a state of panic, took out equity release against her home, to pay that debt. She subsequently provided him with further sums totaling £20,000 over a 2-year period, in different times. And David has never repaid any of this money. So when Maria came to Hourglass, she had no heating or hot water in her home. Her boiler had broken and she couldn't afford to have it repaired. Some of the things that we did at Hourglass with Maria, we discussed options like a non-molestation order, which would place restrictions, put conditions on David being able to contact, to approach, and so on. And it's a civil injunction that's available in domestic abuse cases. And that was obviously that would have been to reduce the risk of further financial harm to Maria. However, at the time, Maria felt that she had made a decision that she wasn't going to give him any more money if he did ask. She seemed resolute in that decision, and he had actually not been in contact for a number of months. So it was agreed at the time that her safety in that respect was probably okay, and wouldn't require perhaps that order at the time. Hourglass also put Maria in touch with the Disability Home Improvement Team at her local authority to repair that boiler. We also supported her to speak to the Equity Release Company, whose repayments at the time were £11,000 per year to repay the interest on the lifetime mortgage loan. Maria now has a repayment plan of £50 per month. We also put Maria in contact with Step Change, which has helped her a lot. So that's a quick kind of summary of Maria's case and how we were able to support her to an extent. I'll hand back to you, Carrie, if there's any questions or anything you'd like to.
Yeah, and we have to be really mindful and cautious how much information is shared in these forums. And Maria, as you say, is an anonymous example. Now, you work predominantly in Scotland and Northern Ireland, don't you, Colin? But Maria was actually based in England, and the definition of domestic abuse is broader in England in terms of adult family members, intimate partners and former partners. Can you tell us what the challenges might have been and how they might have been different had Maria been in Scotland?
Yes, so you're right, Carrie, that in Scotland, domestic abuse still only covers intimate partner relationships or ex-partner relationships. So in a case like this, where the perpetrator was the grown-up son of the victim, the the domestic abuse legislation wouldn't apply. So non-molestation order or the Scottish equivalent, non-harassment order, would not have been applicable in this case. And also, you know, the extent of the economic abuse probably would not have been taken as well, not it would have been taken seriously, but not to the same extent. There wouldn't have been the same criminal justice kind of response because of the sort of the domestic abuse kind of aggravation there that might have increased sentencing, for example. So there are definitely gaps there in terms of how victim survivors in Scotland might be supported in a case like this. And of course, at Hourglass, probably the majority of our cases will have the grown-up children as the perpetrators. Probably about 50% of our cases that will be the case, as opposed to probably around 30 to 40% of where the perpetrator is partner or ex-partner. So you know, so potentially that can be quite a problem in a Scottish context, more so than in the rest of the UK.
Thank you, Colin. And certainly in England, where that does kind of meet that that definition, and legal proceedings can go ahead for many other people, particularly when that's an adult child or an adult grandchild. They don't want to go down that route for many reasons: fear, judgment, shame, but also we know the legal process is really complex and long, and the impacts can be long-standing. So there are many reasons why people wouldn't want to go down that route. Matt, can I come to you and ask you, many people might think a debt needs to be written off, can only be written off if legal proceedings have gone ahead. That's a myth, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. So legal proceedings don't always need to have gone ahead, and we don't always need to take the legal route to resolve debt problems. You know, in some extreme cases, creditors may actually consider debt write-off, as Genevieve said earlier on, without the need for legal proceedings through their own sort of volition, with any debt write-off that they need to put in place. Although some debt solutions are legally binding, to protect the customer, they don't require things like court attendance or anything like that. So although they may be legally binding solutions, you know, it's not like you're going to court and going through some of the proceedings that you may expect. A debt relief order, for example, can be completed from the comfort of your own home with the support of what's called an approved intermediary. That's something that we do provide at Money Wellness through one of our debt relief order hubs. So yeah, like I say, it doesn't always need to involve legal proceedings, nor do you need to have gone through legal proceedings to look at debt write-off.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything there, Genevieve, before I move on?
I'd just add that, yeah, that's why it's really important to have those kind of financial remedies in place, because for a large number of people, pursuing legal action will be inappropriate. And what's great about some sort of agreement that you come to with your bank is that it's much quicker to come to that conclusion, and it can deal with your debts much swifter and without you having to be tied to the perpetrator in any way.
Thank you. We've had some really good questions in the Q&A, and feel free to add some more in. One of those questions is from Jasbinder, and she's asked, have you had much success with debt write-offs for people who are victims of coercion? So that's probably to either Matt or Genevieve.
Yeah, so I can certainly take that question, and Genevieve, feel free to come in where you need to. So, yeah, as part of, we've got a specialist team that will deal with anyone that's struggling or have sort of extreme extra support needs. Every situation is completely different, but as far as the coerced debt goes, we often approach the individual creditors, explain the customer's situation and the circumstances and what's led to this point. And yeah, it'll often be that through the relationships that we've got with different creditors, different organisations, they will often look at debt write-off, and that's something that we have had success in. So I really would stress that it's something that can happen, so please don't shy away from it. Make sure you get in touch with the specialists and they should hopefully be able to offer you that support and do whatever they can to maximise the chance of that happening.
Lovely, thank you. Genevieve, was there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, just that our research found that 13% of people with coerced debts got write-off. So obviously it is happening to some extent. Whether it will be granted or not is dependent on all sorts of criteria that vary from bank to bank. But I think I would echo what Matt said about not shying away from it. It's worth trying to pursue if someone is in a domestic abuse situation where economic abuse has happened, because there are dedicated teams who have expertise and knowledge about what needs to happen for write-off to occur.
Thank you. And sort of systematically, I'm thinking, we're here talking about some of the solutions when somebody is in this position. But actually, what we want is to prevent this from happening in the first place. So there's much more around awareness and some of the collaborations that you're doing with the financial sector. What sort of calls to action do you have for the sector in terms of recognising when coercion is taking place and preventing that person accruing that debt in the first place through coercion? Any thoughts there?
I'm happy to jump in first. I think the prevention point is really tricky, because ultimately it goes beyond financial services. It goes to a kind of wider societal issue of gender-based violence and patriarchal control. So these are really big questions that as sort of firms and debt advice providers, we can't address. But I'm really pleased to see that the government has incorporated economic abuse within their violence against women and girls strategy. And that doesn't discount the fact that victim survivors aren't always women and girls, but overwhelmingly they are. I think the most important thing that financial services and debt advice can do is to be able to identify it where it occurs, because it is really difficult to prevent where abuse is occurring. And for victim survivors, they can't prevent the fact that they are being abused. It's just a really awful situation. But what we can do as people interacting with victim survivors is we can try to build knowledge and expertise to try and be able to identify coerced debt and to identify those red flags, because sometimes it won't be immediately obvious. But having that knowledge of coerced debt and also what can be done and where to signpost and where to offer support will be really crucial to at least getting that support and addressing it as early as possible.
Thank you, Genevieve. And that kind of leads us on, that public awareness and that societal sort of awareness raising piece leads us on to Ian's question, which is asking, he works for a local age UK up in the Yorkshire region. And he's asking, how can we raise awareness of these issues? Is there training for staff and volunteers who are working with older people? And how can we best work with other local stakeholders to provide support for people affected? I can answer some of that question, but I'm happy for the panel to chip in as well. So at Hourglass, we have training. We can offer training. You can contact us either through our training at wearehourglass.org email, or through our inquiries inbox or our helpline inbox. Ask us, talk to us about, we offer pop-ups, we offer training, we offer public speaking, so we can do that. We can also set up referral pathways as well, so that you as professionals can directly refer to our frontline services, who have advocates working all across the UK. So that's something that we can do at Hourglass. But I'm sure Step Change and Money Wellness will have their support services and training offer as well. So I'll hand over to you both.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Carrie. And I think I'd probably echo similar to what Carrie's mentioned there, is that it's all about collaboration and, referring people where you feel like that support's needed. And that's something that we can help with at Money Wellness as well. If you ever do identify anyone that you think might benefit from debt advice and that holistic approach to looking at all the solutions that might be available, then you absolutely can look at working with us at referral pathways and ways that we can really look at getting the most value for your service users and getting the service that they deserve. So obviously I will share my details after today's session, so that can be shared around amongst everyone. So if that's something you want to look into, please reach out to me and we'll be happy to support.
Thanks, Matt. Genevieve?
Yeah, definitely. We're available for any support regarding debt advice and similarly through referral pathways. But I would also like to plug the brilliant work that Surviving Economic Abuse do, because they are the leading charity on transforming responses to economic abuse, and they offer bespoke, specific training on economic abuse. They're really the leaders in delivering that training. So if your organization needs training on economic abuse, I think that would be a brilliant place to go. And we got some really good research training for this project that was excellent. And I'd also flag Money Advice Plus, who have a dedicated support line for people who've been through economic abuse. And my details are also on that slide. I'm happy to share it if anyone wants to chat through anything more.
Right, and we'll share all of these resources in a follow-up email as well. So there's a plethora of options out there, isn't there? It's just sharing that awareness and making sure people are aware of what is available to people. Joe's asked a really interesting question, and it's a tricky one, actually. I knew she'd ask me a tricky question, Joe. What happens with coerced debt and power of attorneys? And something I would say at Hourglass is that misuse of lasting power of attorneys particularly, but all forms of power of attorneys, is something that we see a lot of. Often we see it after the person has died. Sometimes these things we don't become aware of them until it's too late. Colin, you might want to chip in here from your experience, but can anybody answer this question, because it is a tricky one?
I mean, certainly with power of attorney, obviously, as you say, Carrie, sometimes this type of abuse is discovered after the death of the donor, and at that point, obviously, the power of attorney ceases to exist. It can make it difficult for the authorities, particularly looking at the Office of the Public Guardian, for example, to take action. It's not impossible, and there are still legal remedies in those cases. When where the victim is still alive, and this is discovered, there are, of course, the normal pathways, where such as going to the Office of the Public Guardian to report where that abuse of power of attorney has taken place. It can then become a legal matter. It could be a police issue. It could be, it may be the Office of the Public Guardian will be able to place certain conditions and impose certain sanctions on the attorney. But there are options, and there are avenues to explore in that case. How successful that is can vary, but in principle, it is something that can be addressed, because power of attorney is a formal and legal process, and so there are processes to manage that when it does go wrong, when it is misused or abused. As I say, though, those processes will depend on, first of all, processes are usually only as good as the people who are using them, but also it will depend on I suppose the quality of evidence that is able to be gained, and like with any criminal investigation, it has to there has to be that level of proof of what has actually happened. So it's not to say it will always be resolved, but it can be.
Thanks, Colin. We've had another tricky question here. Have you ever had any luck with adult social care safeguarding investigations when, well, I'm assuming it's a safeguarding investigation, it doesn't actually say that, when there's deprivation for care, so where somebody's deprived somebody's assets, and then Michelle asks, do you think adult social care should be rewarded by a percentage of coerced money stolen or recovered? That's a really complex question. I don't know if I could answer that. Anyone want to chip in there? No, it's a pretty tricky question, isn't it? I think there are challenges with adult social care and safeguarding teams recognising sometimes domestic abuse and coercion. We are, it's still not a topic that we all understand as professionals. It can be really challenging. I think when there is kind of a deprivation of assets for care funding purposes, that the legal teams in adult social care will probably take some of that forward as well, and that would be probably their responsibility to decide whether or not there needs to be legal proceedings. But I'm happy to be challenged on that, and we can certainly look into that and answer that question in a follow-up email, Michelle. And Michelle's also asked another question. I think prevention would be enabled if it is essential that a competency assessment is undertaken when there is a hug gift, such as a home. Indeed, all gifts should be deemed illegal unless accompanied by an independent competency assessment. So it's more of a statement. So thank you, Michelle, for that input. Diane has said, brilliant presentations, thank you so much. The EAEF form should only be completed by trained debt advisors, and then she asked, or can domestic abuse workers fill them out on behalf of victim survivors? Matt or Genevieve?
Happy to jump in there. Yes, at the moment, it's used by specifically trained debt advisors. It can't just be any other practitioner, and it has to be a debt advisor that is specifically trained to use and fill out the form.
Thank you. Nice, clear answer. That's great. And Jay was asked, as professionals, should we be asking if clients have a power of attorney as a standard question? We should always, in terms of the Mental Capacity Act, be assuming that somebody has capacity, and if they have capacity, if they want to manage their own financial affairs, that's absolutely what should be happening. Even if they've got a lasting power of attorney set up, it doesn't have to be enacted. So just because you've set up a lasting power of attorney, that can only really be used if you choose to allow your attorney to manage your financial affairs, or you are deemed to lack capacity to manage them, Joe. So it's part of that relationship. It's worth asking if people have got one set up. And it might be during the course of your work. I know that you're an older person's IDVA, so I know that in the context of the work that you're doing, it might be well worth asking those questions, because there may have been coercion taking place, influence. There are some concerns around lasting power of attorneys and how easy they are to set up, so that people can be quite easily influenced to set up a lasting power of attorney at the moment. And there's work that Hourglass are doing in terms of trying to safeguard people. So I won't go into that into greater detail because that's a separate webinar, but it is worth asking that. I don't think it needs to be standardised. It's whether or not it's appropriate, determined by your relationship. But Colin, have you got any thoughts? Because obviously you're doing this day in, day out. Do you ask that question as standard?
It's certainly it is very well worth asking, and it is something that is data that we do routinely capture in terms of our service users. Because of the sort of demographic that we are working with, it is more likely that there will be a power of attorney in place. As you say, Carrie, it not necessarily being used, but whether there is one in place it is still quite useful information, especially if there are concerns around economic abuse of any kind. It may be that there is some concern there, even if that power of attorney is not being used at the moment. It may be that someone who is named on the power of attorney is actually an alleged perpetrator of economic abuse towards that person. So So it is quite useful to be aware of that, because if we are aware that, for example, that an attorney is is harming that individual already, then that's probably something that should be looked at in terms of the future, when that power of attorney actually might come into play. So it's something that could be addressed now, and that power of attorney could be changed, for example, while the adult still has capacity.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, and some people will set up a lasting power of attorney at a time when they really trust that person. They feel that that's the right person to appoint. It might be more than one person, and things change. Life changes through the life course. Our relationships become more complex. And so it's really important that those decisions are revisited, isn't it? We've got some more questions here. Lucy asks, and a good question, Lucy, I should have probably mentioned the acronym. What is an EAEF? I think I know the answer now because I've learned something from you. Matt, could you answer that question for us?
Yeah, so the EAEF is the Economic Abuse Evidence Form. So as we've already mentioned, it's a form that can be used to essentially submit evidence to try and get that debt written off without having to go through some of the legal channels that we've mentioned already.
Thank you. And Ian asks, what experiences do you have raising economic abuse through the local safeguarding adults boards? And would they be using an EA evidence form? My understanding is they wouldn't be, because it's specifically to debt advisors, isn't it? Any other questions? I think we've finished. I think I've covered all the questions. I may well not have done. Penny, are there any in the chat that I've missed? Don't think so. I think we've covered everything in plenty of time. So before I kind of conclude today's session, which has been really informative, the thing is with this topic is we're always learning. You never know everything, and this has been particularly informative today. So thank you. All of you. If you want to share any final insights before we do, I'll give you a moment to have a think about that. These webinars are monthly. The next webinar will be marking World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. That is on the 15th of June, and we have a webinar planned on the 12th of June. So please do sign up for that. And share it with your networks. We want as many people to come on these webinars as possible. They're all free, and we'll have another one in July, which will be called We Are Hourglass. And that will be very much focusing on the work that we do at Hourglass. We're going to have lots of our colleagues talking to you about their roles and what we do across the whole of the UK. So we're hoping that will be quite informative as well. Do feel free to reach out to us if we can help you in any way, offer any training or raising awareness or developing referral pathways. We're really keen to hear from professionals. So before we conclude, I've just spotted another question in there. No, I can't see any more questions. I think we're done. I'm going to just pass over to our panel for any kind of final reflections, or if you want to share and remind people how they can contact your organisation. So I'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, so again, I just wanted to really reiterate my thanks to everyone that's listened today. Thank you to the fellow panellists, Colin, Genevieve, and yourself, Carrie, as well, for your contributions. I think even for myself, it's been really insightful, and I appreciate all of your contributions. If anyone does want to look at any additional support with debt advice, whether that be an individual or an organisation that's looking to support the customers, please get in touch with myself. My email address is matthew.sheeran@moneywellness.com, and I'd be more than happy to reach out and see how we can support you.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll hand over to you, Genevieve.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great to talk through our research and also to kind of connect it with the work that Matt and you, Carrie and Colin, are doing at Hourglass. I think it's just really positive to know that a lot of us care very much about this issue and that real positive progress is being made. It's just so important that I know we focus on the things that are not working, but actually we're we're making some really good progress in even understanding coerced debt. Yeah, I left my email address on the slide, but it's just genevieve.richardson@stepchange.org if anyone wants to contact me. And Step Change offers debt advice both online 24/7, but also on the phone Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And our number is 0800 138 1111. So yeah, we're available for free debt advice.
And finally, Colin, just a final question and then a bit of a roundup from you and what we do at Hourglass. We are a service for older people, and older people can ring us, they can text us, they can email us, they can use our website, and we have a chat function. But we are also available to professionals, aren't we, that want advice, or relatives that have a concern, or friends and family. Can you just sort of explain a little bit about what our services are all about, and any final reflections today?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that although we obviously exist to support those who are age 60 plus who are experiencing any form of abuse, we will often receive calls to our 24-hour helpline from concerned others. Often that will be family members of an older person who are concerned that there might be financial harm, economic abuse going on, or any other type of abuse. And we do get calls to the helpline from professionals as well, who are looking for support for a client or for advice in terms of recognising things that might be going on, that spotting those signs of abuse. But we also do receive referrals from partner organisations. We receive referrals from police, from social services, and from other charities. We're into our casework support services. So alongside our 24/7 helpline, we also have the ability to provide one-to-one casework support to older victim survivors. So that obviously is consent based, but we can take referrals where that consent has been given, and we can provide support and information. So we'll do safety planning with an individual. We'll help them to access services such as Step Change, for example, or others that might be relevant to their particular situation. And we will we'll take them on a journey over a period of often initially we'll offer 6 sessions of support, but it may be extended beyond that. We will sometimes support through court processes as well, and we'll use various tools alongside that client to help them to recognise their own sort of progress towards safety and security and wellness. Depending on the particular situation that they're in, obviously there will be different outcomes, but we have ways of monitoring that as well to make sure that that we're able to provide the best support that we can to the older victim survivor.
Thank you, Colin. And just a reminder to everybody that 1 in 5 older people will be affected by abuse, harm, or exploitation every single year. And 1 in 5 of us all will experience domestic abuse in some form or another across our lifetime. It can impact on any single one of us. Thank you very much for joining us. We've actually finished early, which these things are not normally the case, are they? So I'm going to ask you, at 12:30, you're all going to get an email with a survey on it. Those completions of those surveys really help us to shape these webinars, to get some feedback, and to also think about new topics, any topics that you're really interested in that you would want us to deliver in the future. We will look at those, and we will hopefully plan those in. And as I said before, they're free to all. Also, you will get all of the resources we've discussed today, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you follow Hourglass Charity or Hourglass Safer Aging on YouTube, you can catch up with any previous recordings of webinars, but also this one as well, and feel free to share amongst your colleagues. So thank you very much. Thank you to our panel of speakers. It's been fascinating, and I hope you will have a lovely day this Thursday. Thank you very much.